everyone, it's Mitra once again. This is our day two, and I would like to thank you so much for your subscriptions. I'd like to thank you for following me on the Twitter, on LinkedIn. I should say on X. I apologize. I'm an old fashion kind of a gal, right? And on Substack. And so, if you're new, please put a like and please subscribe. We are going to pretty much pick up where we left out yesterday, and we're going to discuss what's happening in the region, not just militarily, but politically and economically. And ladies and gentlemen, that is the key. War isn't just about military, but it also has political and economic ramification. And a nation, for example, could win militarily but lose economically, could win economically but lose politically. So all these three things do matter. They're part of a triangle, right? And so we're going to deal with them one by one, what's happening militarily and what's happening politically and what are the ramifications for that. And then we're going to put it all together, right? So what is going on militarily? Well, let's see what the Israelis and the Americans, I should say, we're doing right now. And then we go to the opposite side. So the Israelis have hit hard Lebanon. They have hit Lebanon very hard, and mainly because of what Hezbollah, after Hezbollah attacked Lebanon, which we will discuss momentarily. The Americans have also had, they were hitting Tehran, the planes are going over, and they're doing massive bombings. How many have died? We don't know. What they have done, we don't know. But we do know the intention of the United States was to decapitate the leadership and to make sure that the leadership would collapse and eventually there would be an uprising. Unfortunately, it's the opposite. Not only has unified the people, but the leadership has not decapitated to the point of being irrelevant. And that's, ladies and gentlemen, because of the system of Iran. As we said before, that system is centralized and decentralized, which basically means whatever the leader there is, they have five people below him trained for years and years. So when one goes, the other one comes in. One goes, the other one comes in. And for example, each section, if like 20 people in one group goes, group B was taught to do what it needs to do. So they are centralized and decentralized. So when we killed all those people, they're still going. As a matter of fact, they are hitting extremely hard. So much so that the United States is finding itself in an extremely difficult condition, right? So militarily, we are hitting, but we are not able to not only stop them, but we are finding ourselves in a situation that in a week or so we may literally run out of supplies. And I'm going to tell you what that means and how is that possible. But in the case of the Iranians and their allies, the Houthis and the Hezbollah, it has been massive. First of all, let's take Hezbollah. Hezbollah is extremely important because the traditional mindset in the Western intelligentsia and coming out of the Israelis and the West was, oh, they're finished and nothing. We killed their heads and look, we keep bombing Lebanon. But what they didn't understand was that the Hezbollah didn't respond back to to Israeli attack on Lebanon because the Lebanese leadership asked them to. And they wanted to teach him, you go ahead, you take the responsibility. Let me see what you can do. And they were waiting for this. They made sure their enemy underestimated their ability. And that is the problem with the Americans, I should say, and the Israeli strategy, because we tend to underestimate the enemy and overestimate our own capabilities. The Iranians do the opposite. They underestimate their own capability and they overestimate their capability of the Americans and the Israelis. That way, they were never caught off guard. They're already prepared. So you have Hezbollah hitting, right? So what happens? They hit Haifa. Why is Haifa important? Because the American ships are there. You have Hamas hitting back as well. You have Houthis hitting back. So now Israel finds itself being attacked by Hezbollah, by the Houthis, by the Iranians, by Hamas, and it doesn't have the capability to fight back. Yes, it does. It's hitting, but remember, its missile system is limited. Its planes are limited. There's going to be a limited time. And why is that important? Because Israel was relying on the United States. And the Iranians know that. And so what the Iranians have done is what? They have hit every American base in Iraq, in Qatar, in UAE, in Kuwait, in Bahrain, in Jordan. Boom, 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 boom. And why is that important? Because we need those bases. And remember, the American bases are like a spider web. If one goes, the other is going to go. So, for example, Kuwait is massively important because that's where our logistic is. So when the American base was hit by the Iranians, they just didn't take off the ground. They hit the ammunition. It exploded, right? And so if Kuwait can't give supplies, Jordan has only maximum 5 days of oil or supplies. And so, and in the case of Jordan, not only they have been hit, much more apparently, according to social media, the sources are coming out than we say it is, but you have a political crisis that's preventing further assistance to a point from the king. Yes, they're shooting down, but it's causing a massive political dilemma, which we're going to discuss momentarily. Then you have Qatar being hit. Then you have Bahrain just blew up. And so what you have right now is that the United States, all of the bases that's supposed to help US, it's being attacked. And so even though we're trying to rebuild, but the minute we rebuild, like for example, we tried to rebuild the Kuwait, the what's on the ground, the Iranians came and hit it again. And they're doing that basically, not just to make, they hit, but they're doing that also, they're doing all of these missiles attack. But the Iranians know very well the Americans and the Israelis have limited resources when it comes to missiles. We may have A-15, we may have A-16, we may have B-52, but those things are not, they can be taken out by missiles, but more importantly, they need fuel. They need to be refueled. So if the field area where they are being refueled is damaged, they can't land, which means they have to circle or they have to go all the way back to the Israeli side, someplace safe, which even farther. So they have created an environment, the Iranians, that you could either have to go really far or you have to land. Now, some planes do land in, obviously, in Kuwait, the smaller planes. But if you're being hit, the damage is seriously important because it could have massive consequences. And that was apparent today when three, I believe, F-16s were hit, or F-15s, I apologize, were damaged. The pilots, thank God, came out. The American pilots are safe, thank God. But three were taken out. I believe so far we have four American deaths, God rest her soul, and half a dozen or a dozen injured. So this is just the beginning. So militarily, they're hitting, right? And so when the United States came to Iran a few days ago and said, "Do you want ceasefire?" the Iran was like, "I'm not going to give you a ceasefire. I'm going to finish you off." And the reason the Iranians are able to say that is not just because they know they are preventing the United States to have access to the bases. They know eventually these missiles will finish, but they also know because of political and economic ramification of that. And political is very important because when the war started, remember, in the world, it's the Western order, and then there's the non-Eurocentric, non-Western, which is the global South, which is 70% of the world. And when the Israelis and the Americans attacked Iran, they did it in the middle of negotiation, which is not even illegal. I mean, which is illegal, which is irrelevant, but they did it in the middle of a negotiation. So once again, we are seen as the one who stabbed people in the back because middle of negotiations with attack. So we have already lost the political respect, and we have already lost a political war. Not only the Iranians have got that, perhaps maybe not with the leaderships of the Western world, but for Iran, it is irrelevant because it's the global South that matters. But more importantly than that, the Iranians have the Arab and the Muslim streets. They may not have the Arab leadership, but they have the Arab streets. And for them, that's exceptionally important. Because in the case of Jordan, you may, as I said before, you may actually see the king leave. I'm not saying the Hashemite kingdom will fall. That's different. The Hashemite kingdom is not going anywhere, right? But this King Abdullah may not be able to stay because you will see from the Hawitas, the Bani Hassan, all of them are protesting. They're blocking roads. They're extremely angry at the king for hitting. And so for taking the missiles, for allowing Jordan to attack another Muslim country, for not defending the Palestinians. In the case of Bahrain, same thing. There is anger. It's a 75% Shiite country. You have a Sunni leadership that's placed in power in Saudi Arabia. Even in Saudi Arabia, people who are extremely angry at MBS, who not only have tried to westernize, not modernize Saudi Arabia, but has openly sided with Saudi Arabia. So these leaders are really on a shaky ground. and MBZ as well. So even though the United States was trying to do a regime change, I think you may see a scenario that it's not the regime change in Iran, but it's the regime change in Jordan, Bahrain, 95%, and perhaps even MBZ of UAE. MBS, it'd be interesting to see. So the Iranians are also winning the political war. So far they're doing very well militarily. So far they're doing politically, right? And that leaves economically. And that, ladies and gentlemen, is the key for Iran. So I'm going to tell you something. Iran is not alone. I don't mean the Houthis or Hezbollah. Iran is part of an alliance, the Chinese, Iranian, Russian alliance, that has made this strategy of a nutritious war in which the longer the US stays, the weaker it becomes economically. And that is the intention of these three. And that is beginning to bear fruit. Look what happened. The Iranians closed the Strait of Hormuz. One of the gas fields were hit. So, as a few hours ago, I think gas was like $82 a barrel. At this rate, it could go $100 by Sunday. But it's not just oil going up is important. What is also important is the insurance. Either the insurances are not insuring anything going to that area, or they're doubling the price. If none of that is enough for you, you have a third layer. So you have this triangle, and that third layer is China saying, "I'm not putting my ships," and considering the amount of goods that are transported on Costco containers from China, you could have imagined. So oil prices have gone up like a triangle. You have the insurance rate going up. And then the last one is the containers from Chinese ships not going there, or Chinese ships not going there, which basically saying they're going around. So the price of that will have massive, massive impact on every country in the world, but particularly the United States, who has one third of its trade comes from the Persian Gulf and comes from actually the Red Sea. And so, in a perfect term, let's say you bought this cup for $10. I don't know, for no $5 at TJ Maxx. Okay, you bought it for $5 at TJ Maxx. Well, that TJ Maxx $5, it's going to be 10 because first of all, oil prices went up, so the transport went up. Second of all, it has to pay insurance rate. It doubles, so you have to pay double the insurance. Third, it's not going to those containers. That means it has to go all the way around, which means they're putting more gas. So this sucker could be like almost double. We're just talking about just a cup. So imagine on an economy that's a $38 trillion debt. What does that mean? That means for United States would even have to borrow more money at a higher interest rate. And that is the intention of the Sea Alliance, China, Iran, Russia, not to just destroy the US militarily. That's not the issue so much as well as economically. And I think this will continue. And that is why most people were going against a war. They were warning United States, but Mr. Trump and, obviously you have the pro-Israeli groups who are pushing for these. These were most of the Americans, I think 80% were against it. The majority of the military was against it. The majority of the economists were against it. So now the United States is finding itself in a situation that a war that not only cannot win, but it cannot even get out because they could leave, but as they flee for their lives, the Iranians going to hit. So doesn't mean, by the way, the Iranians have it easy. Doesn't mean they're not being killed. Doesn't mean their leadership hasn't been hit. It has been hit hard. But their system that's designed for decades is already been instituted. And so they have the world on their side, perhaps not everyone in the non-Western world, but certainly in the global South, at least 80%. Certainly they have the Islamic world, and that you're beginning to see, or you have already seen, where millions and millions have showed up in Afghanistan and Pakistan and Indonesia and Azerbaijan and India and Iraq. All of those have shown up, right? And mourning Mr. Khamenei's death, demanding some kind of a retribution. So United States is in a very, very difficult position as day goes by, and it's going to get worse and worse and worse. It has to come out, ironically, of an exit strategy now. So I know people don't want to hear that. I think people want to say we're the greatest army, we have the greatest military, but I like to remind people that the United States hasn't won a war since World War II, with the exception of Grenada. I also like to remind the United States no more controlled the medium. This is not 2013 that we told people what to saw, what to read. This traditional social media power is significantly diminished because people have access to news outside of the United States, in Asia and Africa. They have information that they never had before. So they see everything and everyone. News that is not covered by Wall Street Journal, by CBS or CNN. That's why, like, anyone under 50 generally don't trust the traditional media anymore in the United States, traditional Western media anymore in the United States. So these are very challenging times ahead. I think we have to accept the fact that perhaps we have already significantly, what's the word I'm looking for? Not done well, for the lack of a better term. I don't know, how to turn it. But for me, the fact that they attacked the American embassy massively in Iraq and burned it, the fact they attacked the consulate in Pakistan, the fact that they attacked the consulate in Jordan massively says we have already lost a political war. The fact that the oil prices are going up, the fact that insurance rates are going up, the fact that we have a $38 trillion debt tells me we are losing the economic war. And in the military war, I'm not sure how we can win, not just because we don't have the missiles or anything like that. It's because this is Iran's territory. At the end, this is their land. This is not ours, right? They could, as one person said the other day, he says, our blood could be spilled here for thousands of years, right? We could handle that, but yours is not. So I think these are very challenging times for the United States. Whose fault is it? Whether you want to blame the president, whether you want to blame the Israelis because you're the one who pushed for it, whether you want to blame the Israelis lobby or the Zionists, that's true as well, whatever you like. The point is, at the moment, we find ourselves in extremely difficult times. And I think with the president's speech, unfortunately, it didn't help the situation as well because, he didn't explain it to the American people. And so let's just see. I thank you for listening to me, and we'll talk back later. And by the way, before I forgot, I did a 3-part article on Substack, and it's on LinkedIn, and it's on PremiumX, whatever you like, whichever you use. It was written about a month ago, and it was about the military and the economic implication of attacking Iran. So read that, take a look at it, and let me know what you think. Take care.